Hi. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the case for drive chains on Bitcoin. Drive chains are an old proposal in Bitcoin from about 2015 by the Bitcoin dev Paul Stortz. It's kind of sat on the back burner for a long while now because of just internal Bitcoin politics, the general ossification of the protocol, the difficulty of getting any kind of soft fork in these days. There's only been two soft forks since 2017. But I think the implications of it could be huge and majorly beneficial for Bitcoin. So I think that it's time that it gets some consideration. Drive chains consist of two separate BIPs or Bitcoin improvement proposals: BIP 300 hash rate escrows and BIP 301 blind merge mining. So let's get into this. So the general problem is that Bitcoin is losing ground right now. The first issue is the security budget in Bitcoin. The block subsidy halves about every 4 years, every 210,000 blocks. And so part of the Bitcoin security model is that fees must eventually fund all security. Except this really hasn't been happening. If you go to mempool.space or any other Bitcoin fee tracker, fees are perpetually stuck relatively low, about 1 to 3 sats per VByte, except for occasional spikes like during the launch of Runes in 2024. And so already altcoin networks like Ethereum generate far more fees than Bitcoin, and these are paying customers. The Lightning Network barely pays miners anything. In fact, it kind of takes fees away from the base layer, and you only make an on-chain transaction when you open or close a channel. And Bitcoin has very limited functionality. It can't natively do smart contracts, at least the kind that you can do on chains with much more expressive scripting. It doesn't have any privacy features built in. You can't do prediction markets or any number of other things. So what ends up happening is that the demand leaves. It goes to Ethereum, it goes to Solana. We essentially seed our competitors. And then part of evidence of this is that there's more wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum than the entire Light Network by an order of magnitude. So without new fee sources, the long-term security is at risk, and we also lose that innovative potential. So what are drive chains? Drive chains are basically just an independent blockchain that plug into Bitcoin using BTC as the currency. So there's no coin, but it can emulate all the features of an altcoin or any original idea that the developer releases. So drive chains are secured by the same miners that already run Bitcoin, and it consists of course, the two BIPs, BIP 300 hash rate escrows. So these are basically special containers for sidechain deposits. You can move your funds from the base layer into the sidechain. You can use whatever unique features, smart contracts, privacy, prediction markets, whatever. And then when you're done, there's a withdrawal process that takes 3 to 6 months. So 13,150 miner confirmations. So this withdrawal is very slow, it's very transparent, it's very auditable, and he only uses an unused op-nop5 opcode, so it's a very tiny footprint on the base layer. The second BIP is blind merge mining, and this essentially means that the layer 2 miners hash the block and then submit it to layer 1 miners who put that into the Coinbase transaction. The layer 1 miners don't need to run any sidechain software, and then the sidechain users pay fees in Bitcoin, which the miner then pockets. So with the same hash rate, they get more revenue, which is beneficial all around. So with drive chains, miners essentially get paid twice. Merge mining means that they get fees from every sidechain simultaneously using the same hash rate. And this can be a substantive amount of money. For example, a privacy chain with 1 million transactions per day at 50 cents per transaction would be $180 million a year. A prediction market with $10 billion volume with 0.1% fees means $10 million a year. DeFi chains, big block chains, each one adds a new revenue stream. So the miners begin to earn from a diversified portfolio of sidechain economies, and their revenue is no longer solely dependent on Bitcoin's price, especially with base layer fees being stagnant for so long. And then if they attack a sidechain, they're in essence destroying their own income for the future. So it's the classic goose and golden egg situation. The drive chain economic security model comes from game theory, not trust. Miners essentially make more money by keeping the side chains alive than stealing from them. So if there's fee revenue of $7.2 million a day from side chains, which comes out to $216 million a month or $2.59 billion a year, then with like a 7.7% discount rate, that would come out to $33.57 billion in net present value. Theft would be a one-time payout, whereas honest mining is a perpetual income stream. So rational miners will always prefer ongoing revenue over killing the system. If less than $33 billion in this instance is deposited across the sidechains, theft never makes sense economically. To enforce this, the withdrawals from sidechains are deliberately slow. They're 3 to 6 months or 13,150 plus votes. And any attempted theft will be visible for months, and the community can respond via UASF. But even in the worst case scenario, only sidechain users are affected, never layer 1 Bitcoin users. I'd like to touch on why the Lightning Network alone isn't enough, and it's that even if it's a decent payment rail, it has some blind spots. And the first is that it pays miners almost nothing, so in effect worsens the security budget. Miners only get paid when you open or close a payment channel. It only does payments. There's no smart contracts, privacy, or DeFi. It requires always online nodes, which puts your funds at risk, and you have to lock up capital, which presents an economic opportunity cost. Lightning's very complicated. You have channel management issues, liquidity, routing payments. So in practice, users are pushed towards custodial wallets and Lightning service providers like Phoenix. And it can't scale to billions of users alone simply because there's not enough space on-chain to open and close these channels. So Drivechains kind of pick up where Lightning leaves off. Every sidechain transaction puts money in miners' pocket. You can build anything with sidechains, privacy chains, DeFi, big blocks, whatever. Users keep self-custody their funds. The failure of a sidechain doesn't affect base layer Bitcoin, and it's kind of more complementary than not competing. Even if you're a fan of Lightning Network, you should support Drivechains so we can get some kind of sidechain that has a lot of the opcodes and features that would optimize Lightning transactions like any pre-vout. One claim is that we don't need Drivechains on Bitcoin because we have federated sidechains like Blockstream's Liquid. But this isn't really true because federated sidechains rely on trusted third parties, whereas Drivechains replace that trust with code and economic incentives. In a federated sidechain, the M of N signers can still collude and steal the funds, so security is ultimately dependent on reputation and legal pressure, not cryptographic guarantees. The membership of these groups is usually very opaque. Users cannot verify the real independence on their own. So nothing prevents theft except the Federation's reluctance to steal. Drivechains replaces all this trust with incentives and withdrawal delays, and the enforcement is through code, not hoping anonymous parties behave. The goal of Drivechains is to absorb every altcoin. Any altcoin feature can become a Bitcoin sidechain with no new token needed. So I'd like to maybe cover some hypothetical examples. We could have an ETH sidechain with a full Ethereum EVM as a Bitcoin Drivechain. You can have privacy chains with confidential transactions, DK proofs, anything Monero, Zcash, or any other privacy coin does. We can have a big block sidechain with high throughputs and low fees while keeping the base layer block size unchanged. We can do prediction markets, tokenized assets, stablecoins. All of this is possible in isolated modular ecosystems. So it's kind of a win-win-win. The users get the features they want, the miners get the fees, and Bitcoin and its network effect gets stronger overall. And there's also kind of this built-in scam filter, and that there's no token to pump and dump. You're just using Bitcoin in its own ecosystem. So only useful projects that deliver value survive. I'd like to address some common criticisms of Drivechains, and the first one is that nobody wants this. Well, wrapped BTC on Ethereum kind of proves otherwise. It's much larger by an order of magnitude or more than the Lightning Network's total value. So that shows that there is demand to hold BTC as an asset, but nevertheless use other coins for their features and smart contracts. The second criticism is that miners will steal the Drivechains. But in fact, economic game theory makes that theft irrational because the stealing is a one-time payout, whereas keeping the sidechain alive is a perpetual future fee revenue. So rational miners will always prefer the ongoing income stream. And this is the same incentive logic that secures Bitcoin's L1 today. A third criticism is that we should test it elsewhere first. Well, testnet software has existed since 2018, and the active development continues. Some people claim that there's a minor extractable value problem, But blind merge mining essentially insulates layer 1 miners from the sidechain MEV if it exists. Layer 1 miners don't see or order sidechain transactions. The sidechain block construction's handled by sidechain operators separately, and any MEV that could exist gets converted into normal layer 1 fees. So to date, no critic has produced a numeric example of Drivechain specific MEV harm. Another criticism is that it's too risky, but in fact it's not. It only uses one unused opcode. Non-participants in that sidechain are unaffected, and it's reversible via soft fork. And the final claim is that federations are better, but in practice, federations are actually just custodians, whereas Drivechains enforce the logic via code and incentives. So overall, Drivechains have basically zero risk and massive upside. The risk is really contained to one unused opcode. Non-participants aren't affected, it's reversible, and the failures are contained, whereas the upside is tremendous. It permanently neutralizes altcoin competition. It solves the security budget as subsidies decline. It prevents contentious hard fork battles since everyone can get what they want in their own ecosystem. It makes Bitcoin development anti-fragile, and it helps scale Bitcoin to credit card levels. And that's why I'd like to pull this Adam back quote. Drivechain arguably could have been more important or useful than Taproot. I'd like to end with something of a call to action. Every day without BIP 300 and 301, Bitcoin loses innovation, it loses fees, it loses users to altcoins. Drivechains is the only proposal that solves the security budget and absorbs altcoins and preserves decentralization of Bitcoin at the same time. It's reversible. It's a low-risk soft fork. So if you'd like to learn more, I'd encourage you to check out drivechain.info. I'd like you to check out the BIPs on GitHub. And if you want to test out the software, go to the Layer 2 Labs testnet. But ultimately, Bitcoin needs Drivechains, and the sooner, the better.